Welcome to Rose Squad Reviews, and if you're wondering, this is the difference having a DSLR camera can make. So beautiful. I'm playing around with new technology, so hopefully this will become the norm. Probably not anytime soon because I still have a giant backlog of videos that I need to edit and get out there. But, you know, it could happen. It could happen soon, and yeah. So, I'm doing a book review today, which y'all should be excited for because just books, man. Books. Yeah, I'm excited. Okay. This book is called Kashka. It's by Ellen Kent McKenzie. It's a fantasy adventure book. It's just about 260 pages long. Kind of gives you an idea of how big it is, and it was printed in 1987. But fun fact, this is actually a prequel to another book that I have reviewed, except at this point in time I haven't filmed that review yet, so we're gonna hope that I keep continuity going and things work great. So to start off, we're gonna be talking about other media. That's right, we're not starting off with like, this book is about these characters, just because I'm gonna be talking about this book in the context of its sequel. I wanted to talk about that first and kind of preface that and get that out of the way. So Kashka is the sequel, is the prequel to the sequel, whatever. Kashka is the book that comes before, chronologically, Taash and the Jesters, which is also by the same author. However, it's written later in our time period, so the sequel came before the prequel, kind of like Star Wars. You get what I'm saying? Okay, glad we understand each other. So I will be kind of comparing and contrasting the two. That isn't to say that the books aren't strong enough to stand on themselves, or to stand by themselves. You could read each one and the other separately without having any context of the world from the previous or other book, and you'd be fine, and they're both great stories. However, the prequel does kind of give information about the sequel that the sequel is set up with the reader not knowing, and so I guess it kind of spoils the sequel because then you know what's going on, and just, yeah, so there is that kind of a relationship in between the books. So it's definitely chronologically linked. It's not like a companion series where you can, like, you can read this one, you can read the other one, it doesn't really matter. It does kind of matter which one you read first, and I would suggest reading Taash and the Jesters first, just because then you get to experience that book as it was meant to be experienced, and then you can kind of more appreciate Kashka a little bit better because you kind of know where it's going. Alright, and now we're going to talk about, what is this book about? The general setup. Because this book contains spoiler information for Taash and the Jesters, I'm just going to call it Taash from now on because words. I'm not going to go too in depth on what this book's about because I don't want to spoil things. We're big on no spoiling here, so no spoilers. Even though it was written in like 1987, so at this point, sort of fair game, but also I want to preserve the integrity of the story for you all who haven't read it, which I doubt many of you have. But essentially, it tells the story of the two jesters, Pip and Kashka, in their youth, and just kind of how things came about to be. Yeah. I will say that the pacing for this book is slightly different than that of its sequel. The main reason for this being, in Taash, things happen fairly quickly over like the span of a year, maybe under that, and in Kashka things are a little bit more spread out. There's stuff going on over like several years, and so even with that you get kind of like time skips and, you know, fun things. But overall the pacing is fast enough to keep the reader's interest and slow enough to be able to be like, okay, I know what's going on and not confused or anything about like all these random jumps in time. Some confusion might be caused in reading the book because I've mentioned this, or I will mention this, in the Taash review. The author kind of causes the reader to need to infer things to be able to get some of the meaning out of the book. Examples of this would be like not adding like the little "said this person" tags on all the dialogue, so you kind of have to keep up a little bit to be like, okay, who's talking, who's saying what. Also, you need to know about like sometimes characters' names aren't mentioned, like, oh, it's this person, and we're just going to assume that you know who this is, and if you don't, then, well, you might figure it out later, you might not. So to a younger audience, this might be a little bit harder to pick up on. I read this book when I was younger, and I definitely figured out more upon reading it later as I grew older, and then reading it recently, I kind of was able to be like, okay, I see everything, and it's not confusing anymore, but it was before, which part of it might have been my age, and also part of it might have been I just did not pick up on foreshadowing or anything, or those little subtle clues at all. Moving on to characters, one of the things that I really enjoyed in this book was the way that they did the characters. A lot of times when there's books with, like, in a series, as the characters grow, or they just change, kind of like the essence of the character is lost. Like, I mean, some change should be expected because of growth. However, the character just doesn't seem like the same person that you fell in love with in, like, the first book. I don't think this is a problem in Kashka, especially with Piff and Kashka. You still feel like they're the same people, even though they're, like, younger and not the same people because certain things haven't happened to them in their lives. But the essence of the character remains the same, and I really appreciated that. I also enjoyed getting to know some of the more minor characters from Taash in a little bit more in depth as they were more major players in Kashka, and just kind of seeing some of the little Easter eggs, like, oh yeah, that character gets introduced in this book. Oh, you know, little fun things. And another thing to note is the author tells the story from the perspective of different characters, so there's some bouncing around. Obviously more characters are used than others, but the perspective changes fairly regularly, and I think this was successful in that the continuity of the story isn't lost, it's maintained, and the story is able to keep its flow as a whole. It's not like choppy and broken up, and things, like hook on. It's kind of funny because sometimes, like, just like with the way that she ends the last sentence in the paragraph, like, oh, the sun was rising, and then, or whatever, and then, like, in the next chapter when the character point of view changes, it's like, oh, the sun was rising. I mean, that's not like the direct quote or anything, but just like the little things that, like, line up when you put them together. Like, meanwhile at the farm, and then, the parallels, and just kind of appreciated that. That doesn't really have anything to do with characters. Oh, I guess it does, but I appreciated it. So obviously the ending of this book is just the beginning for the next book and a whole new story. So, I mean, obviously I can't tell you a whole lot because spoilers. The book ends kind of on a light note, which is in contrast to some of the other things that have happened throughout the book, and the main characters seem undaunted by the task that they're about to undertake, and just kind of full of life and vigor, and just like, yep, this might be kind of hard, but yep, it's gonna happen. Confidence. So, I mentioned this in my previous review, or rather will mention it. There is some magic and witchcraft in this series, and I've said this before, I'm going to say it again, I'm not going to talk about this right now. I plan about talking about it in the future, so hold your horses. It's going to happen, I hope. I will say that the witchcraft is used on both the bad side and the good side, so that there's that kind of a dynamic that you also have to consider, and I will hopefully be referencing this story when we finally talk about this topic, which I hope to do with Kay as a collaboration video. Yay! So I'll be looking forward to that. And just kind of know that that's in there. The book as a whole is also a little bit more dark feeling than Taash was. Just partly there is more witchcraft, but then also just like other stuff is going on. So be watching for our little magic and Christianity and what should people think about this thing video. That's exactly what it's going to be called. It's a very technical term, and that's what we're going to use. Probably not, but that'd be funny if it was. I'll also be giving a link for my review of Taash if you want to figure out, like, oh, so this is the book that's a sequel, and then connect the two in your brain and read them, because I would highly recommend that. So I will see you next time.